Now we're going to start Chapter 6 of Abby Lost at Sea. Abby stood clinging to the foremast of the 120-foot schooner, the Intrepid. The ship headed into a cold northeasterly wind, and each time she plunged into the trough of an incoming swell, water droplets jetted above the deck and moistened her face. Abby's cheeks reddened in the gust, and her hair froze into a chestnut banner behind her. Since rising that morning, she had discovered that she loved sailing. Wrapping her fingers around the rigging, she gazed out over the endless blue sea and sky. The schooner danced into the wind like an untamed pony. "You're a natural sailor," said Captain MacDonald, coming up behind her. "It's too bad the rest of your family isn't." His thick Scottish brogue and the way he rolled his R's delighted Abby. Now she wished her parents and Sarah could join them, but they were resting in their shared cabin below. In fact, out of the two families traveling on board the ship, Abby was the only one who had showed up topside. "They're a wee bit sick in the tummy, eh?" asked the captain. Abby turned toward the white-haired, leather-skinned captain. "Yes, I'm afraid so, all but Pa, and he's taking care of Ma and Sarah." "What calls your family to Hawaii?" Captain MacDonald asked, taking the yellowed meerschaum pipe from between his lips. "Hawaii?" Abby asked. "I thought it was named the Sandwich Islands. Luke always says the islands are famous for their ham sandwiches." The captain laughed as he emptied the pipe over the side of the ship. "And who is this Luke?" he asked, rubbing his silver beard that grew on the side of his face like thick pork chops. "My best friend in Pueblo de San Jose." She swallowed her brimming emotions and stared back out to sea. "My uncle is sick and needs our help. Pa hopes to buy into the ranch once we get there." The captain gave her a knowing look. "It's hard to leave home, isn't it, lassie?" And he went on without waiting for an answer. "But your parents are doing the right thing. It's an effort to improve your lot. Aye, 'tis a grand land you're sailing to." Abby smiled at his hopeful words. "Come on, lass. I'll teach you how to steer my Intrepid lady." With that, the two of them moved away from the bow of the ship toward the aft rear quarters and the large oak steering wheel with spokes of polished wood. "Take her like this, lassie," the captain said as he relieved the Hawaiian sailor on duty, "and hold her steady." He placed her hands on the wheel. It tugged against her grip as if it had a mind of its own, but Abby held firmly. Wonder filled her as she realized that she was controlling the grand vessel. She could feel the push of the wind against the sails and the ocean surging against the wide rudder under the ship. She glanced over at Captain MacDonald and grinned. He smiled in understanding. Sailing could lift anyone's spirits. The wind picked up momentarily. Abby heard it whistle through the shrouds. The wheel tugged a bit more, but she held the ship steady. The captain nodded with satisfaction. "I'll be checking on the crew and leaving Mr. Lancaster in charge of the deck now, lassie. Hold her steady for a few more minutes, and then Chemo will take over," he said, referring to the previous steersman, a large, dark-skinned sailor in blue duck cloth breeches and a white cotton shirt. A red kerchief tied around his neck served as a uniform of sorts. Chemo looked up from rope braiding and gave Abby a wide grin, revealing brilliant teeth. Abby watched the captain make his way forward. His trim form in the navy wool suit with shiny brass buttons mirrored the way he ran his ship, with discipline. When they came aboard, the captain had told her that he ran a tight ship and tolerated no tomfoolery. As Abby watched him pass the first mast, a sudden movement to the right caught her attention. The jolly boat used for rowing to shore sat above the deck, secured to the starboard bulkhead. Abby kept her hands firm on the wheel as she looked the jolly boat over again. A gray tarpaulin snugly covered it. She could not figure out what movement had caught her attention. And then she saw it. One corner of the tarp at the back of the boat was not snapped down. It caught and lifted in the breeze. There it goes again, she thought as the tarp flipped up. But this time it revealed a lock of sun-streaked hair, followed by dark eyebrows and a familiar grin. Her eyes widened in shock. Luke! When she saw him wink, Abby gasped and instinctively let go of the wheel. The ship pitched hard to port. Chemo lurched toward her to catch the spinning wheel, but Abby quickly regained her hold of it. As Chemo's strong arm came from under her to steady the wheel, she glanced over her shoulder at him. His bronzed arm resembled a thick trunk of wood. "Little missy make a messy," he joked, and then broke into a hearty laugh. "I guess I did." Abby sneaked a peek at the jolly boat again. Luke wasn't there. Had she imagined it? Did she want to see him so badly that she had imagined seeing him? "I take the wheel for you now, little Wahine," Chemo said, and Abby gladly gave over the helm to him. She had to get away to think. Was Luke really there? She looked at the jolly boat again. Not even the tarpaulin moved now. Abby headed toward the hatch for a few minutes alone. As she neared the jolly boat, her heart pounded in her chest. Blood rushed through her ears. "Luke!" She wanted to yell. "Are you really here?" But if he was, she could not give him away. Obviously, if she hadn't imagined it, Luke was a stowaway. That was a very serious offense, especially on a ship run by a no-nonsense Captain McDonald. If Luke should be discovered before they put California far behind them, Captain McDonald would turn the ship around and take him home. She was sure of it. "He must stay hidden, and I've got to do all that I can to help him." She bit her lower lip. "Oh, Luke, are you really here?" Once her parents discovered him, they might worry about Luke's aunt. Still, they would be glad to see him, too. She knew they loved him. But by the time they reached the islands, it would be too late and too costly to send him back. Abby walked toward the jolly boat on the way to the hatch, sure that her plan would work. As she approached the boat, she slowed her gait, and her hand instinctively brushed the tarpaulin. It was all she could do to keep from giving him away in her excitement. "Oh, Luke!" her mind screamed. "You found a way!" She climbed through the hatch, eager to get to her sketchbook. She wanted to draw Luke's face right away, and she knew just the caption she'd write beneath it. "When one door closes, another one opens." Abby clutched her skirt as she tiptoed up the steps of the hatchway. As her head popped out of the hatch, she took a moment to get her bearings in the darkness. It had taken hours for her parents to fall asleep. She had lain awake waiting. Once she heard her father's deep snore, she had hurried to dress and made her getaway. She just had to know if Luke was really there. During the midnight watch, she suspected that only a few crew members would be on deck. She stepped onto the tilting deck and made her way, in her stocking feet, toward the jolly boat. She could see 2 lanterns swinging in the rigging, fore and aft, at either end of the ship. Sitting near each was a sailor on watch. The one on the stern of the ship spoke quietly to the steersman. Abby ducked low as she crept forward. When she reached the bulkhead where the jolly boat was fastened, she stood up and lifted the edge of the tarp. "Luke," she whispered. Her voice seemed to disappear amid the night breeze and the slap of seawater against the ship's hull. Suddenly, a rough hand covered Abby's mouth, and a strong arm grabbed her around her waist. Instinctively, she kicked backwards, and her heel met with a shin bone. The hand flew off her mouth. "Ouch!" Luke growled. Abby pivoted toward him. First, a smile broke across her face, and then a look of alarm. "What are you doing here?" she demanded fiercely. Luke grabbed her arm and crouched low beside the bulkhead, drawing her down with him. "I couldn't take being cooped up anymore. Had to stretch my legs, but we've got to get back under cover to talk." He lifted the unsnapped edges of the tarp. "Scoot in." Abby gave him a hug, then glanced to the front and aft. The sailor on the bow stared straight out to sea. The other two were engrossed in their conversation. She wiped the sweat off her palms and crept up on the bulkhead and swung first one leg and then another into the jolly boat. And there, as she sat down and ducked her head underneath the tarp, she made room for Luke. If Captain McDonald discovers us, he'll consider this tomfoolery for sure. Luke slid in beside her and exhaled in relief. After replacing the tarp, he faced Abby. At first, she could see nothing, but gradually her eyes adjusted to the dim light. She couldn't help but grin at Luke. He smiled back. "We won't need a lantern. Your smile's lighting up the night." She laughed softly. "How did you sneak on board?" she asked. For hours she'd tried to imagine how he had done it. "Jacob and I rode Lightning to Alviso," he began. "I made Jacob promise not to tell a soul. Then he took the horse back to my aunt's stable for me, and I waited for a chance to board when no one was looking." He paused. "It took a while." "He makes it sound so easy," Abby thought. Luke sighed. "The hardest part was leaving Sparks. I gave him to Jacob until I get back." His voice caught, as if he couldn't swallow. "He promised to be good to him." Abby took Luke's hand. "He will." Then in a soothing voice she continued, "I'm glad you're here. You're part of our family. Ma and Pa will be happy to have you." She gave his hand a squeeze. "I don't know, Abby. I've been laying here thinking about it. They might see fit to send me back, or maybe write my aunt." He was silent for a second, and then his voice grew harsh. "I am not going back. I'd rather take up a sailor's life than spend more time in her house." Abby chewed her lip. To choose the hard life of a sailor over living with his wealthy aunt's house showed just how bad things were. Everyone knew that sailors worked long hours for little pay and didn't see their family for years at a time. Why is life so unfair? Abby wondered. Luke had lost his family, and if things didn't go well with her parents, he would be forced into a lonely life at sea. They just had to take him once they reached the islands. There was no other choice. But would they? "Did you pack any food?" Abby asked. "Yep, a bag of apples, carrots, and some beef jerky, and I sneaked 2 loaves of Maria's bread. Brought raisins, too." He paused. "But I already missed her chicken and biscuits." His white teeth gleamed as he smiled. She dug in her shirt pocket. "Here, I saved you some hardtack biscuits from our supper. They aren't too good, but they will fill your belly." Luke bit into one. "It tastes like tree bark, only harder," he said after chewing for a while. Abby chuckled. "I better get back to my bunk before I'm missed," she whispered. "I'll try to bring you something from our dinner every night, all right?" Luke nodded. "I especially need a jar of water." Of course, how stupid of her not to have thought of that. "Anything else?" "Nah, just thanks for coming, Ab." His loneliness seemed to fill the space between them. Tears flooded Abby's eyes, but she knew Luke couldn't see them in the dark. This isn't exactly how we pictured our adventure, is it? In the stillness, she could hear him breathe. "No," he finally answered, "but I reckon we've got to be grateful for all we have. This isn't the worst life can hand you." She swallowed hard, knowing he was thinking of his parents' deaths. "Luke, thanks. Thanks for coming." They sat together, listening to the waves splash against the hull and to the mast creak with the pitch and the roll of the ship. They were comfortable in the silence, as only good friends can be. Finally, she pushed back the tarp. "Here I go." She climbed awkwardly out of the boat and crouched beside the bulkhead, and then she cautiously made her way back to her bunk. That's the end of Chapter 6 of Abby Lost at Sea.